Financial literacy is more than the math and a behavior we'll need beyond the classroom. So we're learning how we can help students, families, and teachers build a new generation of financially fit students everywhere. On this episode, FitMoney Executive Director Jessica Pelletier is joined by Danielle Piskadlo and Michelle Brathwaite from Women's Money Matters to share their work and programs to amplify and empower women on their financial journey, and also address the systemic barriers women face around their finances. Together, they discuss the role gender plays in how personal financial experiences are built and what we can do to work towards equity in the personal finance space.
Hello, Danielle and Michelle. I'm so excited to have you guys join us today.
Thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here. Appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. I have so many questions, and we're going to dive really deep into Women's Money Matters. But what I'd love to start with is just to get to know both of you a little bit better. Danielle, I know you've been doing this work for some time, and Michelle, you're new to the organization. Tell me something about the organization that makes you feel so passionate and really wake up every day to do the work you do, Danielle.
Yeah, thanks for that question. For me, it's the theme throughout my career has always been about the model of women helping women. Before coming to Women's Money Matters, I worked at an international microfinance organization, and a really key piece of that was bringing together women into self-help groups and organizing, around women lending each other money in order to sort of grow or start a business internationally. And so that theme of women helping women and supporting them on their journey to greater financial security and wellness has been a passion of mine throughout my career. And that's exactly what our mission and model is at Women's Money Matters.
That's great. And Michelle, what brought you to the organization? I think, as Danielle said, you're a fairly new board member. Tell me about an experience that perhaps you had in your life, or a friend or colleague that really called out why this is so important to be teaching women financial literacy.
Yes, just before I answer that, I just wanted to say thank you just for the invite to be on the call. This is awesome. Um, yeah, so mine hits a little bit maybe deeper on a personal level. I am first generation. My parents both immigrants, and my mom didn't plan to be a single mother, but she did. And and what ended up happening was I just saw my mom really struggle to try to do the best that she can for me, and um, and then as a result, because I wasn't taught about money, I struggled. And my mother was 45 years old. She had suffered an aneurysm and a stroke. And so I immediately became a caregiver. As we know that most women become caregivers. And unfortunately, I became a caregiver very early. So I saw firsthand how important it is to be on top of the finances, because I was still trying to dig myself out of student loans and credit card debt, and then now I had to be a caregiver for my mom. So that's what really prompted me to even go into business, to be licensed in financial services, to be able to assist, because of what I saw happen to my mother. And then here I am, almost following the same path, because I wasn't taught, the essential skills of money management.
That's such an interesting dichotomy. And I'm so sorry to hear about your mom and her illness. But you're right. So many women do take on caregiver roles from kind of birth to the end. I mean, we support our children, obviously, as do all parents. But when, our own parents become elderly, I think it does tend to fall often on, the daughters.
Correct.
And so it is really amazing that, kind of society says that, women should be caregivers, but yet we're not the ones necessarily that are taught about, financial security and resiliency. Danielle, tell me about the work that you do, because I know that you're really trying to change that and really support women so that they can actually kind of fulfill those roles that society is basically telling us that we need to do.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you bring up many good points that I want to touch on. So, at Women's Money Matters, we bring together women into intentionally small groups to learn from each other, support each other, and really be, a cohort of support, right? To feel that sense of belonging that comes with being part of a group. Each woman that comes into our program then that joins one of those cohorts is matched one-to-one with a volunteer coach, which is a really important part of our model. And together they go through a series of financial health workshops that take place weekly over a period of 3 months. So it's a pretty comprehensive program in that way. But the reason why we exist as an organization is because there are so many systemic barriers that women face around their finances, around money. And one of them that you just touched on so perfectly is this kind of bias, I would say, that we have that, sees women more as caregivers. And therefore, like for each child that a woman has, she traditionally earns 4% less. Whereas for each child that a man has, he earns 6% more because he's seen as needing to be the breadwinner. So there's really these like deep-seated biases that we continue to have in our culture that sort of put women into that caregiving role, and that hurts them financially because that is essentially unpaid labor that they do for society.
That's interesting. We've heard for many, many years now, and probably decades, about kind of that pay gap. And I think it's really interesting to kind of boil it down, because I don't think at the end of the day that, CEOs across the world just want to say, oh, let's pay them less because, I think, because like you said, maybe they have to take time off more often, or, they do have to be, caregivers and be in all the different places. So, is there a fix for that? Is there a path that we see that, we do still want to care for our families? It's a great role. I'm a mom. I wouldn't have it any other way. But is there a path that we can potentially start to equal that out a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll happily take this one because the pay gap is one of the topic areas that we as an organization, do center some of our advocacy work around, and we are proud contributors to the Boston Women's Workforce Council. And so I'll just start there. I think one of the main ways to fix it is through data, is through really highlighting the gap and having employers, sign on to the 100% talent compact and be contributing data, both from a gender perspective and also from a racial perspective, and having those internal insights into their own pay gap. So I think starting with data and awareness is key. Unfortunately, a lot of it does go back to the biases that we were just talking about, which are much harder, I think, to overcome at a societal level. But there are ways, and there is work being done around this, and awareness raising is one of the things. But certainly, as we've seen through the pandemic, many women just also require like more flexibility in the workplace. And I think that if there's any silver linings that have come out of COVID, that may be one of the biggest ones for women, and in addressing kind of that ability to stay full time in the workplace, and hopefully address the pay gap over time.
I was actually just going to say that I think it's a good thing to be an optimistic person, and so I always do say the silver lining of the pandemic is perhaps that flexibility is a little bit more normal now, which I think is going to help tremendously. Michelle, you touched on your family situation and how all of a sudden illness can really bring about a drastic change in financial situation. According to your statistics, 1 in 7 women in the US live in poverty. Obviously, health care is a massive component of that. What else do you see that's really driving that today?
Yeah, a lot of it too is even just just working, single mothers that are working, just working on one income. Especially divorced women as well. I see that happening a lot. Like with some of my clients that are once they're married, but then they're separated and they're working on one income, and then they're juggling kids, all alone. But the problem we see sometimes, even before the divorce happens, is that women, usually are the ones that are taking care of their children, so they don't have the same amount of time in the workforce. So they're not contributing. So that means also they're not contributing to the retirement plans and things like that. And then there are, I mean, a lot of corporations have gotten better, but there was a time when they didn't even want to even hire you. If you were a working mom, they would. I mean, obviously, it's against the law to ask, "Hey, do you have children?" But
Thank goodness, right?
Mhm.
but that was a serious issue. And I'm glad, that a lot of change has happened in the workforce, especially being very open to mother's hours, being very open to having systems in place where if you just had a baby, where you can have a quiet space where you can, pump, your child's milk and things like that, and not have it be an issue. One of the things I saw recently too, I don't know if Danielle, if you saw this, but they were talking about even occupational segregation that happened during the pandemic, because they said that 6 in 10 women were just employed in just those three sectors that were the hardest hit by the pandemic, which was like retail, hospitality, healthcare. So again, when you have all these factors of what happened with the pandemic and what was by societals what we're supposed to do, but then also too when we're out of the workforce taking care of our children or our parents, it's very tough to kind of to move forward. But we still but this again there still have been some strides in the workforce, but we still got a lot of work to do. I just think it's just ridiculous that we even have to even ask, right? The answer is always no unless we ask.
Right, right.
Yeah. I mean, the tough part is that so much of our healthcare system is based on work and employment, right? We rely so much on our employers for that access to quality, health insurance. And so that puts women sort of at an immediate disadvantage, especially, many of the single moms that we have in our program at Women's Money Matters. We did an event earlier this year that was centered around this documentary film called Savvy. And they make the point that most Americans are one accident away from financial ruin. And that's a really important thing as a family, as a woman, as a single mom, for sure, to be worried about.
Hmm.
Especially during COVID, we saw so many moms that were worried about what would happen to my kids if I got sick. And for sure, as Michelle pointed out, there's a reason why they were calling it a she session, right?
Hmm.
Because so many of the industries that are heavily staffed by women were hit so hard.
So what I'm hearing, where there's so many great ideas about, how to, talk about the pay gap and whatnot. But I think one of the things we focus on here at Fit Money, and I know you agree, is that resiliency. We know that life, unfortunately, let's hope not another 100 years before another pandemic, but we know that the stock market goes up, the stock market goes down, and you lose a job, you gain a job, and financial literacy is one of those skills that you can potentially deal better, let's just say, with some of those bad times. And so that's why we focus so much on education and awareness. Just like you said, Danielle, the awareness is so important, and starting as young as possible. And I love to see young students that really take an interest in this, not only for their personal satisfaction and thinking of all the things they want to be when they grow up, but really hoping that they build that strength for when the not so good times come along. Talk about, you see so many mothers and families. Do you see that they're kind of bringing their younger children kind of into the discussions, recognizing, as we say as parents, we want our children to have kind of better futures than perhaps we are having now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways that we see kids become very involved in the family planning in our program. We start our work with a vision boarding exercises that I think is very powerful, because it really helps, the moms in our program center and sort of see their goals for the family. But we do see them bringing in kids too, right? It's a very visual representation of like, what are we saving for? What is the kind of big picture goal of, is it moving out of shelter, getting a place of our own? Is it, a small family vacation we're going to take this summer to the Cape, or whatever it may be. So the vision boarding is one thing that sort of kids can kind of very get into in a tactile way with their moms in our program. But we also have a program that's specifically for younger women between the ages of 14 to 22 called Life Launch. And that, I agree with you 100%. I mean, the reason we started that program is because so many women who were coming into our programs and our adult program, Financial Futures, were already in trouble with debt, already in trouble with credit cards. And we wanted to highlight, at a very young age, the power of, putting money away, building that safety net, compounding interest, having it work for you, not against you, and even, a micro investing, anything that you can put away into, the stock market. Yes, it goes up and down, but over time it goes up, and it's a very strong wealth building tool.
I love the vision board. I think we should all, check out our own every now and then and make sure that we're on that path. We were having this conversation recently about kind of the value system behind money. And even though for so long, and even still today, money is kind of the taboo topic. You're really not supposed to talk about it. That's private. It's behind closed doors. But yet we are judged so heavily on what we have. People have to get, the best car, the best house. Parents so often are don't want to say no to their child's requests for the new shoes because of that judgment. Michelle, how do you deal with that with your clients that are coming in and perhaps they are, putting more and more on their credit cards just because they want to show that stability, even if we all know deep down it's not really stable underneath?
Correct. Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of it too is, you know, they feel there's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of guilt and shame. And one of the things that I like to when I'm serving the community is to let them know, that it's not your fault. It's a lot of this issue around financial awareness is systemic. They don't teach it in elementary school. They don't teach it in high school, and even higher education. I think it's horrible, 'cause especially when we get into college, that's where we're first solicited with credit cards. But there isn't a class on debt management. That's awful, right? And so as we get caught up, we feel like, oh, well, since I didn't have, I want to give these things to my children, for the sense of guilt and also a lot of peer pressure, right? There's a lot of peer pressure. So trying to combat that. But a lot of times when I talk to my clients, I said, hey, listen, the best thing that you can give them is not so much are things. Yes, things are important, but we have to make sure that that they fit within the budget and we're kind of prioritizing. And it's not saying no, you can't do wonderful things for your children, but what are the things that you can maybe give your child to kind of set them up for life? And when you're weighing, it'd be nice that if we can trade in all the shoes and bags, for college, right? But we can't, right? So so a lot of times we just try to figure out, okay, well, maybe if we can plan better, what does budgeting look like in terms of, all right, is it something that we can save for maybe later? I'm not saying that you can't do it. It's just maybe it doesn't make sense to do it now in terms of priority. If you can't make your rent or whatever the situation is, do we really want to throw a $1,500 birthday party for a 3-year-old? Those type of things. Again, not judging, it's just talking about prioritizing. And I think that that's what it is. It's just setting priorities and really getting a good understanding a need, versus a want.
Yeah, and I think what you touched on too that I use, in my own family is that transparency. Look, I don't take my mortgage statement out with, my 9-year-old because that would be very confusing. But certainly when we do have to say no, or like you said, explain the opportunity cost. If you get this, guess what? You're not going to get this. Um, it's making them, I think, a little bit more self-aware. And I hope I'm giving them that rationality. Look, we're
Correct.
not perfect human beings. Just because we're moms doesn't mean that we know all the answers either. And
Yeah.
so, talk about kind of just building that self-awareness, Danielle, in those sessions, which I would imagine are so powerful because you are able to deliver that one-on-one support. Um, they always say that, you can't really highlight a problem until you personally identify yourself as having that issue. So talk about that. I've really just identifying the issue is probably, I would say, a fair amount of the beginning work that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. We all have a relationship with money that goes
Mm-hmm.
so unacknowledged, I think, in our
Mm-hmm.
kind of consciousness. But I just saw in July, the New York Times had an article about financial trauma that really resonated with me because it is really a topic that we see play out in some form or another consistently throughout our workshops, right? And it can play out in different ways. Some women sort of have this, like, I saw my parents spend, and that's, what I then a trait that I take on. Or others feel like because I didn't have a lot growing up, all I want to do is save and scrimp and not spend a dollar on myself or my kids. So it's interesting that idea of financial trauma and kind of the link between financial well-being and emotional
Mm-hmm.
well-being and mental well-being. And so that's one of the things that does tie back to kids. The issue that Michelle just touched on of this, like, guilt, we see
Mm-hmm.
that happen, right? I feel badly my kids are growing up, in a shelter or without maybe a second parent. And so I want to fill that void for them, right? I want them to be accepted in school. I want them to have the brand name stuff. And, it becomes this buy cycle. But really, sometimes the best thing you can do for your children is to have that, like, calmness about money
Mm-hmm.
and not be stressed out about money and not worry about how you're going to buy food or pay rent or so it's really an interesting link that exists between financial well-being and like social and emotional well-being as well.
Absolutely. And I just love that, the ability to understand the emotional side of money, and that's why we say all the time that yes, there is math involved. We all know that, building the budget takes some addition and subtraction, but it is so behavioral. You're having to make decisions that are really hard and difficult because of that want, that drive to have these things. And opening a savings account is a wonderful way to start your child off. But if we're not teaching them also how to be smart spenders, we are consumers by nature. Just like you said, we need food, we need shelter, we need education. So important to really understand what's driving your emotions.
And if I could just bring that back to the conversation then about sort of how women are also treated differently in our society, a ton of marketing dollars go into telling women that they are broken in
Mm-hmm.
some way. And here is a product to fix you, right? Whether
Correct.
it's
Yeah.
hair or makeup or weight loss or wrinkles or any age, there is a lot of money spent on telling women that they need these clothes and these shoes to look the right way. And so that's, an additional challenge that women have to overcome, and not, and recognize how much they are the target of marketing dollars,
It's true.
and really overcome that. Not only are they the target of marketing dollars, but then there's a pink tax on many products, right? So, a woman's razor is going to cost more than a man's razor, and then the shaving cream is going to cost more than men's shaving cream. Like, there's these bigger systemic barriers that I think we try to raise awareness about, because once you sort of see that, it's hard to unsee it.
Well, and you can make better decisions, I
Better
think, for
decisions.
yourself, for sure. Tell me how people that are listening can get involved. Obviously, you talked about volunteering and that mentoring that is so important, I'm sure, to your work. But tell me a little bit more for someone out there listening, saying this. This is something I'd love to help with.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for asking that. The number one way that people can get involved is by being a coach, and we very much highlight that you do not need to be a financial expert. Like, in fact, the best coaches are exactly like Michelle, someone who's sort of been there, done that, and worked through it, and is willing to be sort of open and vulnerable, and share their experience,
Mhm.
and that really resonates with the women in our program. So no financial expertise needed, because you're going to go to the workshops together. And the other way that individuals can get involved is by presenting those workshops. So just showing up on an evening and talking through a topic. Some do require a financial background, and others don't, like vision boarding, right? It's just kind of a fun way to center those financial goals in a very visual way. So presenting and coaching are the two ways that most volunteers are getting engaged with us at Women's Money Matters.
Yeah, that's how I got connected.
Yeah.
you know,
I love that. Well, thank you so
there.
much, both of you. This has been such a great conversation. We could go on for hours talking about this. This was a great start. I'd love to have you both back. Danielle and Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today.